I've seen some questions come up recently, maybe a little bit of confusion about the sequence of events in an exploration turn in BX or OSE. And when I had responded to one of these on Reddit, the person flat out asked me, "Hey, have you done a video on this?" And feeling ashamed, I said, "Not yet." Well, here it is. So let's go through it. I'm going to read directly from the book, and then I'll talk a little bit about how this translates into real play or practical play. And of course, you're always, as usual, able to take this stuff and use it however you want, but it's good to have an understanding, maybe even try it as written before you start to mess around with it. And of course, you'll also find tons of advice and opinions on the internet of how much to stick to this or deviate from it. Let's go through it first, and then we'll get all that afterwards. We are on page B23 of the basic of BX, if you have that handy. Order of events in one game turn. First, the DM rolls for wandering monsters. Second, the party moves, enters room, listens, and searches. Third, if monsters are not encountered, the turn ends. If monsters are encountered, the DM rolls for the number appearing. The DM rolls 2d6 to check the distance between the monsters and the party. The DM rolls 1d6 for both the monsters and the party to check for surprise. The DM and the party roll 1d6 for initiative to see who moves first. The DM rolls 2d6 for monster reaction. Then the party and the monsters react. If both sides are willing to talk, the DM rolls for monster reactions and initiative as necessary. If one side runs away, the DM should check the chance of evasion and pursuit. If combat begins, the DM should use the combat sequence to handle combat. And then finally, end of turn. Where necessary, the DM should check the character's remaining hit points, whether or not they need rest, any changes in the party's marching order or possessions, their encumbrance, their sources of light, the duration of any spells in progress, and the total time the party has spent in the dungeon. So remembering, one game turn is about 10 minutes. And this is essentially giving you a procedure of each one of those 10 minutes. Here you go. One turn passes. Now, here are the things that we do. Now, you'll notice it is very much, if you've played board games that are the more complex modern board games, you might find this as the same sort of procedure that might exist at the top of a turn, where you'll have a piece of paper with a checklist, and you go, okay, clear these things out, move your timers down one, take a card, flip a card, all that kind of stuff. This is that same sort of thing. So your question is, hey, am I supposed to go through this every turn? Ideally, yes, you are. Now, depending on the location, rules of the location will supersede these rules. So if you're in a location that says only roll for wandering monsters every 3 turns, then don't follow number 1 and roll every turn. Use your checkboxes, tick marks, whatever you'd like to adjust that as necessary. Number 2, which is the party moving and doing, that's all just the party doing the stuff they do, whether they're checking for traps, whether they're searching a room, whether they're listening at a door. Everything by default takes a 10-minute block of time. That may seem like a lot. I don't think it is that bad. I think in the end it comes out about even. Maybe you say, well, listening at a door doesn't take 10 minutes, but it might if you're trying to be really, really sure, as adventurers might be, that there's really nothing on the other side. You might spend more than 30 seconds doing it. The players aren't wearing stopwatches. I haven't seen any carry around a 10-minute sand timer and set it to see how long things take. So generally speaking, just treat it as is. Don't worry about the fact that it's 10 minutes per se. It's an abstraction. Just go with it. If monsters aren't encountered, then of course we don't have to go through the monster encountering portions of this procedure, and you just go to the next turn. And of course, you don't have to. I've seen some games where the GM will literally say, okay, turn, what you want to do, turn. And you can do that. It's a more board gamey approach, but that's totally fine. Otherwise, of course, if you're the GM, it's, hey, okay, you guys have searched that room or that portion of the room, or you've moved 120 feet down the hallway, and we just reset, give the location, wherever we are now, everything. Then we just move along, and then behind the screen, rolling those dice again, figuring out everything out. Now, if you have encountered a monster, there are important things here which it's easy to forget. So maybe if you're not going to use this book and have it in front of you all the time, I think it would be good to write these on a note card or print out a little reminder, because they are important. So the first thing is, if you've checked for wandering monsters and you roll that there is a wandering monster. So we'll just do with that one first, and then set monsters I'll talk about in a minute. You get the wandering monsters. it is very important to roll that distance. Oftentimes, this is something that gets forgotten, and things end up basically in melee or 30 feet away at the drop of a hat. By the book, which I agree with, there's a lot wider span of distance. The number is 2d6 times 10 feet, so it could be as little as 20 feet away, as far as 120 feet away. And that's important because that gives the party a lot more options. And as the procedure talks about, there is a real chance that the party or the monsters might choose to flee. And then you want to use evasion and pursuit. And that only really is going to make sense if they have room to flee. If you're already at 20 feet all the time, then you end up in that yo-yo sort of approach in combat where everybody's got the same movement. So everyone's just running, running, running. And how do you get away? But if you're at 60 feet or you're at 80 feet, then the folks who are fleeing have somewhat of an advantage. Now, that's not to say that you can't ever flee from combat and it's an impossible situation, but it doesn't have to be like that every time. Plus, if you want to try to be diplomatic or try just any sort of crazy thing that you want to try as players, it's nice to have some space, distance, and distance equals time. If they are at 80 feet away, that gives you a couple of combat rounds anyway to try some stuff versus they're 20 feet away, which is you don't really have the opportunity to try anything. You better have something good, otherwise you're sunk. So that distance, supremely important. Surprise, also supremely important because maybe the monsters are at 120 feet away, but they spot the party and the party doesn't spot them. Or flip it around. The monsters are far away, the party spots them, but they haven't been spotted yet. This opens up a ton of possibilities for play. So you don't want to forget about that. Not everybody sees everything the moment they round the corner, certainly depending on where it is in the dungeon. And you'll notice there's nothing in here about spatial locations in a dungeon. They're just giving you a distance. You're going to have to look at your dungeon map and think about, well, in the context of this dungeon, in the context of what's going on, where might these monsters be? And they might be around a corner. They might be in a room with the door open. They might be on another level, but something that's open where, you have say a two level open atrium, so to speak, and maybe the party's on the balcony and the monsters down below, or the party's down below and the monsters are on the balcony. There could be all kinds of situations. So you're going to have to figure that out. The rules obviously can't mandate to you where exactly on a map, any kind of map they will be. So that's something you're going to have to figure out. But it's super important for that surprise, super important for distance, and then of course super important for the reaction, because one of the procedures that this game relies on a lot in terms of survivability, in terms of that diversity of play, is the fact that not all monsters are out to kill you at all times. Some of them may be wary, some of them may be neutral, some of them may be friendly. And in fact, if you look at the spectrum of results on the dice, it actually is pretty hard to just get attack on site. That's not to say that depending on context, if you're invading a goblin fortress, probably the goblins aren't going to be friendly to you, but you could even think about that and really add some elements of maybe there are factions in the goblin fortress that would love somebody to take out the goblin king so they could take over. So even then you have possibilities. Always put the context of your game situation and the material you're running above these rules. However, all things being equal, you want to see what's going on. And that, of course, plays into distance. If everybody starts at 20 feet, you're probably going to get people attacking a lot because they don't have a choice. Because if you don't attack them, then there's a chance that they might attack you first. You're at low level. You don't have a lot of hit points. You really don't have much room for error. But if you're at 80 feet, maybe diplomacy becomes something you could try. Maybe you can try to, whip out a white flag and see if somebody will parlay. Maybe you can try to lay food down and hope that if it's an animal sort of monster, that it'll just go for the food and not for you. Or if it's an intelligent monster, you could throw some treasure down, basically bribe them to go away. Maybe that will work. But you need these elements of looking at the other party to see, well, are they hostile? Are they nice? Are they neutral? And then, of course, that distance and all this stuff is in play. And that, for me as a GM, that helps with these, make the situations interesting for me, because even I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when a wandering creature is going to round the corner, what their attitude is going to be like, how far away they are they going to see the party going to see them, and then what the party's going to do. So that for me creates really interesting situations for me to play through and also for the party. And then finally, if we get into combat, then you just roll right into combat. You already have your initiative, so you can go with that. Now, initiative I didn't cover before, but initiative is important, I think, even if you don't go into combat. I like it, and I tend to tell my players all the time, if I'm having you roll for initiative, it doesn't mean combat, but it means that timing is important. So let's take an example. You have the party, and then 80 feet away are the orcs. Come around a corner. Nobody is surprised. They both see each other. The orcs, I roll for their reactions behind the scenes, and they are wary. The party doesn't know that yet, and the party's looking at what to do. Now, I want initiative at this point. If the players get initiative, they're going to have a chance to respond before the orc get a chance to do anything. What do? Do they try to make a signal to say, hey, we're not your enemy? Do they fire their crossbows or their bows or start casting spells? What do? Do they run? Do they stand their ground? How does that do? Because that is going to affect what the orcs do on their turn. Obviously, on the flip side, if the orcs win initiative and they put their hands on the hilts and start moving forward cautiously, maybe that signals to the party that they're wary and they can go from there. Maybe the party then jumps the gun. But I want all that timing to matter. And so I want to have that initiative. And then, of course, if we go into combat, the initiative just keeps rolling. And then if it gets to a point where we've established social relations, I can probably drop the initiative. But I like to use initiative whenever timing is important. And in these sort of tense situations, we don't know what's going on. Everyone is trying to sort out what's happening. I think that timing is super important. So I want to keep it. I also think it adds a real tension to the moment because the player's getting ready to act and you really don't know what's going to happen. And if you're in the lead, it's like, oh, you get to go first, Bobby. What do you do? And you're thinking whatever Bobby does could totally turn this encounter on its head one way or another. I think that's a really fun moment, and initiative, I think, adds to that element. If you go into combat, you have combat, and then, of course, end the turn, and then all that stuff is that kind of cleanup stuff. If the party's been searching and looting stuff, you want to make sure they're updating their encumbrance, their possessions. Any timers for spells are going down. If you're figuring out how much time's left on their torches or lanterns, that's also ticking down. It's just basically that cleanup phase, again, like you'll see a lot in board games. Now, somebody on the Reddit thread that I responded to mentioned that they will not roll for wandering monsters if there is a set monster in a location. And I think this is a bad move. Now, I know that it can make some encounters much harder. If you're running into a situation and you have 8 goblins in the room, and then you have some other monsters are coming from behind, you think, oh my gosh, I'm not trying to make this encounter lethal for the party or even more lethal than it already is. I already know this is a tough encounter. I don't need more. However, what you're missing out is on a lot of just dynamism in the encounters. You're going from one encounter, which is 8 goblins, which is always just going to be 8 goblins, to who knows what that other thing could be, especially if you're going with the expansive kind of wandering creature list. It might not be something that's hostile to the party. Imagine if the party then encounters 8 goblins and they're getting ready to burst open the door. Maybe they already have, and you're rolling that up, and then in the back, something else is coming. Maybe you rolled up, it's a troll. Maybe you rolled the troll reacts to the party very favorably. Now suddenly, maybe the troll you're looking at, okay, the troll is favorable to the party. Maybe it hates these goblins too. Now maybe the party has an ally that is unlooked for, which is this troll shown up, starts wreaking havoc for the goblins. That is a really amazing situation, right? And that is a lot more, to me, a lot more fun and exciting and just dynamic than just 8 goblins in a room. Let's even take it a step further. What if the troll shows up and the party's stuck now between this troll and this goblins? Are they able to perceive that this troll is not unfriendly? What do? Do they do something like throw the troll some of the loot that they've got in another room and say, hey, troll, there's more like this where that came from if you help us defeat these goblins? Maybe the goblins try to bargain with the troll. Maybe the goblins and the party decide that the troll is a bigger threat than either one of them. So the goblins say, listen, we don't want you here, but we'll let you go if you help us take out this troll because we perceive it to be the bigger threat. None of that would happen if you just had 8 goblins in the room. So really embrace the dynamics of having these wandering creatures, because it's not just piling on enemies. It's really adding to possibilities. And if you look at something and say, well, just 8 goblins in a room, that's always that same encounter. Now take that 8 goblins in the room and multiply it with the possibility of all the different wandering creatures that can show up. Suddenly that one encounter has been multiplied in what it could be. Sure, sometimes it is just going to be 8 goblins in a room, but it could be 8 goblins and a troll. It could be 8 goblins and 8 more goblins. It could be 8 goblins and some giant rats out of nowhere. And maybe the party could do something like that. Maybe the party takes some rations or some meat and tosses it towards the goblins, and the giant rats attack the goblins, give the party a chance to retreat. You just end up with so much more possibilities. So don't look at it as just, oh my gosh, I'm piling more on the players and I don't want to. Thinking of it as that these extra elements just add all this other dynamism that your party can potentially play into. And remember, they can always run. So I hope that helped. That is the encounter sequence as presented in BX. Let me know if you have any questions. You can hit me up in the comments here. You can find me on Reddit or on social media or elsewhere. I hope that was helpful. If you did find it helpful, I'd love a thumbs up if you could spare it. And if you're not subscribed to the channel and you feel like subscribing, I would also love that. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. And I will talk to you later. Bye now.